serious, what's the creepiest slash scariest thing you've seen but no one believes you? I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going into work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5 something in the AM. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I'd just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired, no one could have slipped anything in either of the two cause lights I'd had, no known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. I was walking to class from the dining hall on my campus when I saw a lady yelling for help and banging on a window of a nearby building. Lots of people were walking past, but I was the only one who seemed to acknowledge it. I went to the window to help and she told me she was locked in a room in the building and that she needed me to come in and open the door. Now, I have no idea the layout of this building and where she was located. So I decided to call campus security for help despite her pleading with me not to call them and to just let her out. I call them, and when I hear them coming I go to greet them so I can take them to the window. I leave for maybe a maximum of 15 seconds, and when I return with campus security she is gone. We can't see her at the window and campus security goes inside to double check and sure enough there is no trace of her. Campus security definitely thought I was crazy, and I'm sure my professor thought I was full of when I explained to him why I was late. No one seems to believe me that this happened, but I swear it did. Had my laptop in my bed just before going to sleep, not plugged in, on battery. Made an offhand comment on some website about how I wasn't scared of ghosts and didn't believe in them. Then I turned it off and went to sleep with the laptop beside me in my bed. Next morning when I try to power it on, nothing happens. But the laptop feels unusually light. That's when I realized the battery had been physically removed and placed in the kitchen. I was alone in my apartment and do not have a history of sleepwalking at all. When I was around 9 or 10, this guy who looked about 40 just kept being in every single public place I was in. With my parents or not, he was there. At the store, yes he was there. Bought everything me and my family bought. In school, yes, he was staring at me on the other side of the school gate. Out in the city, yes, following me in the streets. I told my parents so many times and they just ignored me and said I need to stop believing everything my brother says. Since my brother was really into creepy stuff at the time, he was 14. One day this guy just disappeared. The next thing I knew was that one of my friends kept seeing the guy everywhere. She many times pointed that the guy was outside the school gate watching her. I never saw him on the other side of the gate. Then she told me the guy disappeared after a few weeks. Then this other kid started telling everyone about the guy following him. About 7 months passed and I moved to another town. Still gives me creeps. I saw a panther-sized black cat darting out of a water retention / artificial forest near a school in the desert. Logically, it shouldn't be able to survive there, but holy, I saw it. Animal control wouldn't let that exist. There isn't really food enough for it, and the summers get dangerously hot. If you've got black fur, must have been 4 to 5 feet long. It doesn't make sense, but I 100% saw it, and so did the friend I was with. I was at this scene of a suicide, work related. Guy shot himself with a shotgun, right under the chin. When I walked in, a black cat was sitting in his blood and staring at me. Really weird. Not quite sure how young I was at the time, but it was probably between 5 to 8. I was in my babysitter bed at the time in her trailer park. It was 3 AM. I had woken up because I had to pee. When I woke up, I looked down the hallway to see my babysitter leaning against the wall like one of the stereotypical cool guys do in movies. And I made eye contact, and I felt my body go cold because she was still sound asleep next to me in bed. I went under the blankets trying to hide, and when I looked back she was gone. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I've never told anyone. I just sat in her bed watching infomercials until 6 AM when she woke up. Never even thought about sleeping there again. I honestly forget how much this affected me until I started writing this. Really freaked me out, man. Footsteps and banging in my attic. For about 2 months, almost every night I would hear from my attic. The steps are only like 5 feet from my room. Small taps or footsteps. Then it gradually got louder to the point it sounded like an audible foot was pressing on the wood. I told my dad, and he told me it was probably an animal that got up there or something. Thing is, my sister heard it too, as her bedroom was in the same hallway as mine. My dad might have been right, as it was completely gone after 2 to 3 months, and right now at 2 AM, I don't hear it. And I swear to God, if I hear it after I post this, I'm actually gonna piss my pants. In the same room of my old house, I have seen a convulsed face floating outside my window. My brother has also seen it too. I saw the same face over a number of periods, and it would do stuff like smile and float closer and further from the glass. Our youngest brother a few years later complained that he didn't want to play with the boy in his room anymore as he was getting too much blood on his toys. It was the same room. Not sure if it counts as creepy or overall scary, but it was weird. Back in high school I lived in a large apartment complex. It was maybe around 8 to 9 at night and completely dark. I was with a group of friends, 4 or 5 people. We were just talking and messing around with a friend's pair of walkie-talkies as we decided to look up in the sky as 2 fireballs, or what can be described as fireballs, just appear in the sky and slowly move in a line. Just as that happened, we started getting what sounded like military communication over said walkie-talkies. That was really static, but words came in every now and then. About 10 or so minutes later the fireballs disappeared and the communication cut out. There was absolutely nothing about this on the news the next morning, and no one ever believed me. I woke up to something. It sounded like a door shutting. At first I thought it was a dream, because I could hear it in the dream as I was waking up, kinda like when someone calls your name when you're dreaming. But then I looked at my cat. His hair was completely standing up, and he was beaming at my bedroom door. This was the moment when I got really scared. BC, I know animals can pick up on that, and I thought he might know something's wrong. My cat doesn't do this type of thing unless a dog is in the room. So I looked over at the door, and the only way I can describe it is it looked like it was swaying slowly, like it was breathing, like someone was standing on the other side of it trying to hear if I was awake. This swaying was accompanied by a shadow. Asterisk, I don't mean a supernatural shadow, but it looked like the shadow of a person behind the door. I was paralyzed in fear. I lied there for 5 minutes naked watching this door away. I considered yelling and trying to scare them away, but I was terrified someone might respond. I legitimately thought this was the moment where I will have to defend myself or be killed. I don't own a gun, but after 10 minutes or so I mustered up the courage to check every room in the house. I checked every corner too, but there was no one there. I don't know what happened, but my evolutionary traits kicked in, and I completely believed someone was outside my door. I guess this isn't super scary, and I DK if it really fits, but it still weirds me out, and my friends just think I'm crazy. Back when I was a freshman in college, I went out with a friend of mine. He ended up dancing with some girl, so I went and grabbed a seat at the bar. Girl came up to me and bought me a drink because she liked my style and introduced herself as Sapphire. We chatted for at least an hour, had a few drinks, and at some point she said she had to leave, so I asked for her number and she scribbled it onto a bar napkin. But then we ended up chatting more, and one thing led to another, and she invited me to her apartment. We go there and start hooking up, and she asks if I've ever tried and if I wanted to do some. I said sure. After it kicks in we go for a walk. We were talking about the constellations and space for a while, but then I noticed she got quiet. I had my eyes glued to the sky for the entire walk, so I look over, and she's gone. I freak out and start retracing my steps to get back to her place, yelling her name and checking bushes. My high assumed she was just peeing in a bush. Get back to her apartment, knock on the door, and some guy answers the door. Keep in mind this was like 4 AM at this point. Some guy answers, and I ask if he knew Sapphire and described her. He said he had no clue who I was talking about and to just go home. So I did. I ended up crashing at a friend's place because my trip was going south and I knew he'd be able to calm me down. Next day comes and I'm still trying to figure out what happened to her. I call the number she gave me. It was disconnected. Went back to the apartment. Same guy answers. Still no idea what I'm talking about. Even knocked on some of the neighbors and tried the same room location on different floors. Nothing. Talked to the security guy at the front desk. Said he remembers me coming in a few times but never saw me with a girl. Called up my friend who was at the bar with me and asked if he saw the girl I was with. He said he never saw me with a girl. According to him, I was sitting at the bar alone for a bit, had a few drinks, and left after like 30 minutes. I have no idea who this woman was or if she even existed, but I remember her so vividly I can't believe that I imagined it. She just vanished. I have no tangible proof of her existence. Freaks me out to this day that I spent an entire night with this person who didn't exist. I still don't know what happened that night.